Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. Right now, behind closed doors, Donald Trump Jr. is facing questions from the House Intelligence Committee. It's the first time that he's facing lawmakers in their investigations of Russia's meddling in the 2016 election and, of course, possible collusion when it comes to the Trump campaign. This is just as the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee is now joining the call to subpoena that very same Donald Trump Jr. to get him before their panel. And there is movement on the special counsel's investigation as well. Deputy campaign aide Rick Gates may be facing more legal trouble. A lawyer for Gates, one of 4 people charged in that probe, says that they have been told more charges could be coming from special counsel Robert Mueller. CNN's Manu Raju is on Capitol Hill following all of this very latest. So, Manu, what's going on behind closed doors right now with Don Jr.?
Well, Donald Trump Jr. has been before the House Intelligence Committee for about an hour. He came to Capitol Hill this morning, avoided the cameras, avoided press at all costs, went to the back corridors to get into this meeting. We expect it to last several hours. Now, this committee has interviewed several of the key players who were in that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting in which Donald Trump Jr., of course, was promised dirt on the Clinton campaign. The people who were at the meeting, including Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, who has met with this committee, as well as some of the Russians who were at the meeting, the Russian-American lobbyist Rinat Akhmetshin, as well as Ike Kavaladze, who was a representative for one of the families that was involved in some of these discussions. And we have now learned that Rob Goldstone, who is that British publicist who helped arrange this meeting as well, will be interviewed next week before the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Now, Kate, one thing they're trying to figure out is whether or not all these stories line up, whether or not there's any questions or holes in these in the different accounts, as well as whether or not Donald Trump Jr. had continuing communications with Russians after that meeting. We've also learned that he spoke with WikiLeaks through Twitter direct messages after that meeting. The question will be that will certainly come up in this closed-door meeting, as well as whether or not he spoke to his father, then candidate Trump, about any of these communications when he met with the Senate Judiciary Committee staff in September. Kate, he said he did not have those communications. We'll see what he says today, Kate.
And of course, he avoided cameras on the way in. Manu, any word if he could speak to you on the way out?
Very, very unlikely. We expect him to avoid the cameras on the way out as well. We'll see if any of the members decide to talk, and whether any of the members have any concerns, particularly the Democrats, about what he said or what he didn't say during this testimony, Kate.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Manu. Manu's on it for us. Thank you. There's also this, a historic announcement with global impact and another campaign promise fulfilled. President Trump is expected to announce in less than 2 hours now that he's officially recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and at the very same time announcing that the United States will be moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, something many a president has promised and not one has made good on. And world leaders are reacting, many warning of potentially violent reaction in the region. Let's get the very latest. CNN White House reporter Jeremy Diamond is here for us. So, Jeremy, what exactly do we know about the president's momentous announcement coming today?
Well, the president is going to do 2 major things. The first is to recognize Jerusalem for the first time as Israel's capital, and the second is to direct the State Department to begin moving the U.S. Embassy, which is currently in Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem. Now, that's a process that could take several years, according to senior administration officials, but it's a process that is already beginning to roil this region. The president yesterday fielded calls from leaders in the region, U.S. allies, Arab leaders in the region in particular, as well as the French President Emmanuel Macron, and of course there have been warnings from the British as well and other leaders around the world that this is a move that could potentially stymie the peace process as it currently stands, and could also unsettle this region, which is already perpetually on edge. Palestinian leaders announcing 3 days of rage in response to this, and protests are expected not only in Jerusalem and the West Bank, but across the Middle East perhaps, and U.S. officials at diplomatic facilities in Israel and across the Middle East are beefing up security as a precautionary measure. Now, senior administration officials said that this move is simply an attempt to recognize a reality that Israel's seat of government is effectively in Jerusalem. And of course, it's making good on this 1995 law to begin moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But the reality is, ultimately, this is the recognition of a campaign promise that the president made, and a lot of critics right now are going after the president for putting that campaign pledge above diplomatic concerns. Kate?
And can they be one and the same? Can progress on a campaign pledge mean progress in the peace process? That, of course, is a big part of the discussion right now. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Well, all eyes are on the White House, but let's head over to Israel right now. CNN's Ian Lee is live in Jerusalem as people, of course, there are waiting for the announcement as well. Ian, we've already, as Jeremy is laying out, hearing objections from world leaders, especially Arab leaders in the region. Explain why this decision is so controversial, please.
All right, Kate, we're going to have to go back to 1967, then, and the Six-Day War, when Israel took control of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and the Sinai Peninsula. And then later you move forward to present day, and the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, these are parts of what the Palestinians want as a future state. And so the land was going to be negotiated through a settlement, through the peace process, especially East Jerusalem for the Palestinians. They want that to be the capital of their future state. So essentially, with the United States saying that that Jerusalem belongs to Israel, that signifies to the Palestinians that they no longer have a claim to it. So that's what's really angering a lot of Palestinians. And you're getting a lot of anger not just with the Palestinians, but really the Arab and the Muslim world, because Jerusalem is home to the holiest sites for Judaism, Christianity, and the third holiest site in Islam. And that's really what's angering a lot of Muslims, and that's why we're getting these threats of protests in other countries as well, not just in Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. Kate.
All right, Ian is there. We'll be gauging reaction there. Our eyes stay on the White House as we'll be hearing from the president this hour. Hopefully, he'll be speaking, and we'll be bringing you that tape when it comes. But joining me right now to discuss, Elise Labott, CNN Global Affairs correspondent, CNN correspondent Oren Lieberman, usually reporting for us in Jerusalem, here with me today, and Martin Indyk, former U.S. ambassador to Israel under President Clinton and former special envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations for President Obama. Ambassador, if I could start with you. You became ambassador to Israel the same year this law went into effect, instructing the president to move the embassy to Jerusalem. That announcement is officially coming now from the president. What does it do?
Well, I think it's important to understand what his aides have said he's going to announce. That is to say that he recognizes, and therefore the United States recognizes, Jerusalem as Israel's capital, but he's actually not going to move the embassy. Like all presidents before him, since President Clinton in 1995, for 22 years, again he's going to sign the waiver. And his aides have come up with a excuse, it lacks all credibility, that he's actually not going to move the embassy for many years. He can move the embassy tomorrow by simply sending the ambassador up and putting a plaque on one of the two large American facilities that exist in West Jerusalem. So they've created this attempt to have it both ways. On the one hand, please the base by declaring that he recognizes Jerusalem as the capital, but on the other hand, not moving the embassy. And at the same time as all of that, not defining what area of Jerusalem he's actually recognizing. So it's a kind of thing that's going to please nobody, and in the end could well generate violence.
At the same time, Oren, the White House, in their background briefing, has said that with this announcement, from their view, they believe that it shouldn't have an impact on future peace negotiations. It shouldn't have an impact on any future boundaries that should be decided in those negotiations. They may believe that, but do you think anyone else does?
Probably not. From their view, it's a pragmatic move because foreign leaders meet Israeli leaders in Jerusalem. Israel's Knesset, the parliament, is in Jerusalem. But what we'll be watching for here, and Martin touched on this in the White House trying to navigate these sensitive issues, is the specific wording here. Because although the world views this as black and white, and in some respects it is, the wording from Trump is very important. And there is a spectrum here. On one end, if he says Jerusalem is the undivided, unified, united capital of Israel, that would be seen as very pro-Israeli. There would be outrage from the Palestinians, the Arab world, and perhaps beyond. And then whatever Trump had planned for a peace process is dead on arrival. The other end of that spectrum is if Trump says West Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, East Jerusalem is part of a Palestinian state or will be, then the anger would be on the Israeli side, and the Palestinians might find that much more palatable. Realistically, we're expecting something in the middle of that spectrum, something vague about Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Let's work on boundaries and negotiations and figure out the final status in negotiations. And that's, it seems, how he's trying to keep his hopes for a peace process alive.
And this gets to diplomacy, or where the diplomacy lands on this, Elise. I mean, not with the president today in making this historic announcement is his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. He's overseas right now. I mean, and asked about this, here's what Rex Tillerson spokesman said. Listen.
I think the Secretary has communicated clearly, as have all the members of the interagency who have a role in making this decision or being a part of the decision. He's made his positions clear to the White House. I think the Department of Defense has as well. But it's ultimately the president's decision to make. He is in charge.
That does not seem an enthusiastic endorsement of what's happening today.
It's not, Kate. And look, I mean, Secretary Tillerson did not support this move. He has argued, as have most of the other allies, and in fact, you know, a large majority of the president's advisors in the cabinet, that this is not the right time, that it can't be in the absence of a peace deal because it would prejudice the deal. It would lose, the U.S. would lose credibility around the world. And in fact, that seems to be what's happening. Look, you know, President Trump's advisors on the peace process, Secretary Tillerson is not one of them. You have Jared Kushner, you have Jason Greenblatt. They've been traveling around the world, listening to the parties. This kind of seems a little antithetical to what they're hearing. This is about President Bush addressing his supporters. I agree with everything that Martin and Oren had said. It's going to be President Trump. Kind of amorphous thing that doesn't really satisfy anybody. But I think it's going to be, the U.S. thinks maybe this would help, you know, energize the deal, you know, inject something unexpected. I think we're in for a very rough time ahead, especially on the peace process.
And Ambassador, you hit on this, and it gets at something I've been thinking about with regard to this announcement as you look in the details. I mean, you call it trying to have it both ways. The reality is, in making this big he is making this big announcement, but as you mentioned, he's still signing the waiver, and the actual move wouldn't happen for years. It does feel similar to the big announcement he made on the Iran deal. He said he was not going to certify that Iran was in compliance, but then taking no immediate action, and he's not pulling out of the deal. And also, in some regards, maybe even the Paris Climate Accord. I mean, with this, are we starting to see a Trump doctrine, a big pronouncement and less follow-through on the backside?
Big pronouncement designed to appeal to his base, designed to avoid going through with things that his predecessors did, because he hates doing that. He wants to be the disruptor. But on the other hand, in international diplomacy, and particularly on the issue of Jerusalem, he's playing with fire. And the idea that he imagines that he can have it both ways in these circumstances simply misunderstands the importance of Jerusalem to Israelis, Palestinians, Muslims, Christians throughout the world. It's a hot button issue, and the attempt to have it both ways, I believe, will fail, and at a minimum, it will set back his efforts to achieve the ultimate deal in the peace process.
At least one final question, real quick. I mean, what do you make of the argument that? What about the argument that it's the argument that the president and people who and the folks that support him have made about North Korea, which is the status quo hasn't made a difference. Let's try something new, and maybe this gains him credibility internationally.
It doesn't gain him credibility internationally. It does gain him some credibility with the Israelis because it's going to fall short, I think, of what the Israelis want. I understand that. You know, I've talked to some of the president's advisors, and they say, look, these deals are never linear. If you introduce something unexpected, maybe this will galvanize the Arabs. Maybe they'll kind of push the Palestinians to accept something. I think what it does is it prejudices the deal, and it also, you know, kind of calls into question the U.S. Role for decades as an honest broker in the Mideast. This is clearly coming down on the side of the Israelis. And it also, you know, the Palestinians don't have that many cards to play. This is something they are looking to play at the table So to kind of put, you know, these realities on the ground, as we like to say in the Middle East, and Oren knows all about that, this kind of actually hurts the U.S. and any progress, I feel, that the peace team, Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, have been quietly making. They don't have anything big to announce, but they are moving towards putting something on the table. I'm afraid this might set it back a little bit.
And that announcement we are expecting in less than 2 hours from now. Oren, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. Elise, always great to see you. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. We'll be following this, of course, as the announcement comes. We're also following some more breaking news I want to get to. A new wildfire is raging out west, threatening major roadways, landmarks, and hundreds of thousands of homes in California as we speak. State officials are now been forced to shut down a very busy portion of the 405 freeway. And remember, this is not the only fire burning in Southern California right now. CNN's Paul Verkaman is just north of L.A. and hard-hit Ventura, California. Paul, what are you seeing there?
Well, we're continuing to see the advance of flames, Kate. And as you said, this is not the only fire. So let's look at what's going on right here. This is right near the Pacific Ocean. The objective today for Ventura County firefighters is they do not want this fire to cross on the other side of the 101 freeway and burn into these exclusive beachfront homes. As you pointed out, a lot of fires burning. 65,000 acres have burned on this fire alone. 150 structures destroyed, 0% contained. And if you start to do the math, you know that there's that Creek fire in LA County. You pointed out about the fire burning near the Getty Center. You also have the Rye fire. Off the top of my head, that's about 85,000 acres burning right now. One of the things they've been dealing with so much in Ventura County, you can just see faintly little wisps of ash. A lot of firefighters have suffered eye injuries. That's a problem that they're dealing with right now. So they're going to let it burn down here. You're not going to see a huge show of force by the fire department because they're trying to save lives and structures. But it is not a situation where they think that suddenly we're going to have the wind die down and all this is going to burn itself out. This is going to burn more acreage, and we're going to get to that 100,000 acre mark, Kate, I'm sure.
It absolutely looks like it's going to get worse before it at all gets any better. Paul Verkamen's on it. We've got folks on the ground stretched out throughout what is becoming a massive area that is being threatened by these fires now in California. We're going to bring you the very latest throughout the hour. Paul, thank you so much. We're also keeping, of course, a close eye on the White House. President Trump is about to meet with his cabinet ahead of the major and historic announcement regarding Israel, and we will take you there. Plus, hard to believe, but the battle for Alabama's Senate seat just got even uglier. Steve Bannon attacking everyone from Republican Senator Jeff Flake to Mitt Romney and Mitt Romney's family at a rally for Roy Moore. The Democrat in the race turning up the heat as well. We're going to take you live to Alabama. Right now, the president's son is on Capitol Hill, behind closed doors, and in the hot seat, facing lawmakers' questions for the very first time, as he is right now with the House Intelligence Committee. The focus, you can probably guess, Russia's meddling in the 2016 election and any possible collusion with the Trump campaign. Joining me now to discuss, Samantha Vinograd. She's here. She's CNN national security analyst. She served on President Obama's National Security Council. And Michael Moore, former U.S. attorney. Thanks to both for being here. Samantha, we were told, Mani Raju teed us off at the top of the show with the areas where lawmakers want to focus on, because there are so many, as we know, so many strands in all of these investigations. But with Don Jr. specifically, it comes back to largely the June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower, where there was a Russian attorney who promised dirt straight from the Russian government on Hillary Clinton, but also what's also come to light later, which is these Twitter contacts, these Twitter communications between Don Jr. and WikiLeaks. Where do you have the most questions? What area?
Well, the first thing is the backdrop to this meeting on the Hill today is very different than the last time that Don Jr. went to the Hill.
So?
We now know that senior transition team officials, and Don Jr. was one of those officials, directed and authorized General Flynn to work with foreign governments to undercut U.S. policy. So I think the committee is going to be asking if Don Jr. knew what was happening, and also were there any other policies that the transition team was trying to undercut by not working with the White House during the transition. And I also think that they're going to ask him about his foreign travel. We know that they asked Carter Page about his foreign travel, I think a month ago.
Right.
And there's good reason for this. The Russians have a history of using relatively neutral European capitals like Paris, where Don Jr. went, to try to contact intelligence targets and to set up secret meetings that can be used for blackmail purposes. So I think they'll want to know, in addition to the Trump Tower meeting, Did Don Jr. travel anywhere else, have any other meetings that were undisclosed or misreported in some way?
And as more information comes out publicly from the special counsel or from other investigations, how do these answers and stories, how do they all line up? That becomes, of course, part of the question. Michael, I want to get your take. I mean, but we're talking about this is a congressional investigation, of course. Do you think Don Jr. is facing any vulnerability when it comes to Mueller's criminal investigation?
You know, I think so. I think it's never a good day when you're in there having to explain yourself or explain meetings or statements or tweets or anything else that contacts you've had to a committee, whether that be in a congressional investigation or in the Mueller investigation. I've seen this a lot, both representing people and when you had criminal defendants in a case. They oftentimes think they can get in there and outsmart the investigators or outsmart the folks asking the questions. And if they could just have the opportunity to explain themselves and explain what really went on, that they think they're going to clear it all up. And I think probably Don thinks he might be the smartest one in the room today. I think he probably comes by that naturally. You know, we have a saying in our family, and that is that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I think he gets that and thinks that he can get in there and maybe be bombastic and assertive and clear up these questions about these meetings. But when you're in there talking, you don't know what the investigators already know. And you find that people get in there and they want to come in and give their version of events or give their explanation, not knowing maybe that the witness before them or the witness last week has already refuted what they're now testifying to. So I just don't think it's a good day, and I think it probably leaves him exposed. And I think Mueller's probably well on this path, as we're seeing from the charges coming down against other associates.
And along that line, Samantha, I mean, as you mentioned, he was a transition. He was on the transition executive committee. He was a transition official, Don Jr. was. But he never joined the administration. In that regard, does that in any way inoculate the president from any wrongdoing that Don Jr. would be part of?
I don't think that we know yet, and I'll leave that part to the special counsel. I do think that, again, it's clear the Russian government launched a very successful intelligence operation. They tried to target members of the campaign, members of the transition team, and we're now finding out that senior members from both of those places lied to the FBI. And there are real questions, I think, about who knew what when, and what they told the FBI. And so on the transition team, now Vice President Pence headed the transition team. We know that senior members of his staff directed and authorized Flynn to work with foreign governments. So I do think there are questions about whether he knew what Flynn was doing and who else knew what was going on.
Real quick, Michael, what do you make of this? Rick Gates, his attorney now says that more charges could be coming. That's what they learned in court from the special counsel's team. What does this mean?
Well, it tells me that probably with the charges that we already saw, that there's additional money laundering charges coming out. We've seen the Mueller team do their subpoena with Deutsche Bank. I've said all along, and I think most folks are agreeing, that this is going to come back to a quid pro quo and maybe looking back at some Russian money that either flowed to Trump, his investments, his family, whatever it is. And clearly that's where Gates's charges stem from when it comes to financial crime. So a superseding indictment in and of itself is not a particularly new thing, in that, you know, it just simply means that the investigators are moving forward, maybe amending the charges. But when we start talking about money laundering charges, Manafort, quid pro quo ideas, and Russian money, you know, I'm not surprised, but I think it just gives a bigger axe to hang over the head of folks that need to be talking about people on deeper in the Trump administration.
Great to have you both here. Thanks so much. Michael Moore already winning the day because he said not once but twice something I never say on TV without biting my tongue: quid pro quo. Very impressive work. Very impressive. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right. The message from Alabama voters to Washington has been the following: stay out of our Senate race. So why then is someone straight from Washington making all the news today in Alabama? We're live in Alabama. We'll take you there. Plus, breaking news: massive fires in California threatening thousands of homes and some of the busiest highways in the country. We're going to take you there live. What's happening right now? Mitt Romney and Steve Bannon. Last we checked, neither of them are running for Senate in Alabama. But you might not know it by listening to a campaign rally last night. Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, of course, laying into Mitt Romney during a rally for the actual Republican candidate, Roy Moore.
Here's how it is, brother. The non-affirmance, you know, that's you know, we can debate that, but you hid behind your religion. Yeah. You went to France to be a missionary while guys were dying in rice paddies in Vietnam. You ran for commander-in-chief, you had 5 sons. not one day of service in Afghanistan and Iraq. We have 7,000 dead and 52,000 casualties. And where were the Romneys during those wars?
You hid behind your religion. So why has this campaign become about Mitt Romney's military service? Good question. Bannon clearly charged up after Romney called Roy Moore a quote-unquote stain on the Republican Party and the nation if he wins next week. CNN's Caitlin Collins is in Alabama with the very latest on this race. Caitlin, if it could get uglier, it just did. What's going on here?
It certainly did. We're here in the last few days of this race, Kate, and though Steve Bannon came to the state to rally support for Roy Moore before voters go to the polls next Tuesday, he spent less time defending Roy Moore against those multiple sexual assault allegations made against him and more bashing the people up in Washington that he doesn't like Mitt Romney, saying that he did not serve in the military because of his religion. Now, this is because Mitt Romney has criticized Roy Moore in this race, saying not only that he should step aside, but that if he wins, it would be a stain on the nation, a stain on the GOP, and that keeping this seat in Republican hands simply isn't worth it. Now, speaking of these allegations, Roy Moore's opponent in this race, the Democrat Doug Jones, has steered clear of them so far, but now that we're in the last week, he's also firing some shots of his own, Kate.
I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. When you see me with a gun, folks, I'll be climbing in and out of a deer stand or a turkey blind, not prancing around on a stage in a cowboy suit. And I damn sure believe that I have done my part to ensure that men who hurt little girls should go to jail and not the United States Senate.
Now, Jones followed that by saying this race is not about politics, but it's about decency. But the Moore campaign has certainly seen a boost in these last few days with the full endorsement from President Trump and the Republican National Committee announcing that it's restoring its support for the Moore campaign in this state, Kate.
All right, Caitlin, great to see you. Thank you so much for laying it out. Joining me now to discuss, Ned Bryan, CEO of the conservative grassroots group American Majority. Matt Lewis is here, CNN political commentator and senior columnist at the Daily Beast. And Simone Sanders, CNN political commentator and former press secretary for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. Great to see you all. Ned, Steve Bannon tells Mitt Romney to stay out of Alabama. Bannon's not from Alabama either. So for the people in Alabama who say, you stay out of our race, all of you people from outside of Alabama, why are they listening to him?
Oh, I think at the end of the day, Kate, really doesn't matter what Mitt Romney says. You know, honestly, what Bannon says, it is what it is. But there was a poll a couple days ago that showed 83% of the likely Republican voters thought these allegations were definitely false or probably false against Roy Moore. So they're going to be the ones choosing the senator, and that's how it should be. The people of Alabama should actually choose their senator, not people from outside the state. I think the thing that's going to remain to be seen, and I do think Roy Moore will win. I think he'll win by 6 or 7 points next week. As he goes to the U.S. Senate, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him as long as Al Franken remains in the Senate, who we actually have photographic proof of his, what I call sexual assault on a sleeping woman. So I'm not really sure people have moral authority right now to talk about stains on our nation, stains on the U.S. Senate, as long as Al Franken sits in the U.S. Senate.
I think Mitt Romney probably has more of a moral authority to speak on these issues. I'm just proffering up than others would. But I want to get to I will get to the Democrats in just a second. But Matt, the hypocrisy of his hit on Romney's lack of military service is, of course, pretty rich, considering Trump's lack of military service as well. But Kellyanne Conway said this morning on CNN that the president actually talked to Mitt Romney last night, made a point in this discussion to say that they spoke last night. Didn't say if they talked about this. What are they trying to say?
I don't know why they had that conversation. The only speculation that I would have is that what Steve Bannon did last night was offend a large block of Republican voters. And I'm talking about members of the LDS Church. It's one thing to attack Mitt Romney if you want to call him a chicken hawk or somebody who dodged the draft. I think that's bogus, but you could say that. That's personal enough. But to go after him for his faith.
He was a missionary. Like, okay,
yes.
Keep going.
Well, and look, I mean, you know, you've got Orrin Hatch, who's contemplating whether or not to retire out in Utah, who is offended by this. But you've got a large block of LDS voters in places like Arizona and Nevada as well. And here you have somebody who is ostensibly representing the Republican president of the United States using, I think, what could be described as bigotry against that faith. So maybe that's why Donald Trump picked up the phone.
Simone, I'm starting to think, and I think Ned would probably actually agree with me, I'm starting to think that there is not a single persuadable voter left in Alabama when it comes to this race.
That's right.
If there is one, how is Doug Jones going to win him or her over?
Okay, well, I would also agree. There is not a single, quote-unquote, persuadable voter left in this race. So it all comes down to turnout. And is a large block of moderate Republican voters going to go to the polls on December 12th? And are they going to check the box for Roy Moore? Are they going to check the box for Doug Jones? Are they going to leave the box blank and not go to the polls at all? And then will a substantial amount of Democrats, particularly African-American Democrats, come out and will turnout reach somewhere upwards of 28% for African-American voters in Alabama? I don't know. The bar is really high. It can be done, but I just want to caution folks. Exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I just want to caution folks that I think we've hyped this thing up. And I do not believe that a large enough block of moderate Republicans will refuse to pull the lever for Roy Moore for Doug Jones to come out victorious. And I know because they elected Donald Trump.
Well, let me talk about another element of this. This was just handed to me as Ned, you were bringing up who has the moral authority, because Democrats have problems when it comes to the issue of sexual harassment in their House as well. This just came in that Kirsten Gillibrand, senator from New York, she is now calling on Senator Al Franken to resign. This is marking the first time a senator has called on the Minnesota Democrat to leave office, as of course he is facing allegations of sexual harassment, and he's responding to those, and those, however, do continue to mount. Simone, what do you make of Kirsten Gillibrand coming out and saying this now?
We need one standard across the board. So if folks are going to call on Donald Trump to resign, John Conyers, who has retired or resigned, there's a congressman from Nevada that has also been accused. If folks are going to call on everybody else to resign, then we have to hold Senator Franken and anyone else that is accused of sexual assault, sexual microaggression, sexual misconduct to resign.
Go ahead,
Kate,
Ned.
I want to say this, though. This $17 million slush fund in which congressmen paid out harassment suits. Yeah. I want every name to come out on that, regardless of party, Republican and Democrat. Anyone on that list, I think they are morally obligated to resign. At the end of the day, though, Kate, what I'm concerned about, it used to be in this country, allegations were considered false until proven true, and now we're saying allegations are true until you prove them false. If there is evidence, such as payouts,
I just want to be really clear.
Resign regardless of party affiliation.
I want to be really clear. I want to be very clear that there are credible women that have come out and not just accused Roy Moore or even Al Franken or John Conyers, but the president of the freaking United States of America with credible stories. And so we cannot start talking about, oh, well, we have to prove the women. These are credible stories. And when we live in a culture that has perpetuated and supported sexual assault, sexual misconduct, that has protected predators, and that has villainized victims, that is a problem. So I'm glad that our current climate is now supporting folks who have the courage, women and men who have the courage to come out and stand up and tell their stories and speak their truth about the folks that have essentially preyed upon them. And we should not try to lambast those people or put them on the stake. What we need to be talking about is why we have a culture that protects the predator and villainizes the victim.
Well, but let me jump in.
More than happy to talk about culture.
Me too. Let me jump in. This is also encapsulates why this has put the White House and the president in a very uncomfortable position. Give me 1 second, guys. The control room is talking to me. Let me quickly let me depart real quick and go over to MJ Lee. She has more reporting on this news coming out about Kirsten Gillibrand and Al Franken. MJ?
Well, Kate, this is a really pretty remarkable moment. We have seen now a number of Democratic senators almost simultaneously putting out statements either through social media or through their offices, basically saying that Al Franken should resign. Kirsten Gillibrand became the first Democratic senator to actually call on Franken to resign, and then a number of others followed. I just want to read a couple of what these senators said, and I just want to, put this in perspective, which is that up until this point, even though there had been multiple women, either named or unnamed, who have come out to say that over the years Senator Franken had touched them inappropriately, up until this point, we did not have a single senator actually say that he should leave office. Now that has changed. Here's a little bit of what Kirsten Gillibrand wrote on Facebook. She said, while Senator Franken is entitled to have the Ethics Committee conclude its review, I believe it would be better for our country if he sent a clear message that any kind of mistreatment of women in our society isn't acceptable by stepping aside to let someone else serve. Now, we also heard from Senators Claire McCaskill, Mazie Hirono, Maggie Hassan, all of them Senate Democrats and women, of course, who are now saying that Senator Franken should resign. And just to remind you of some of the reporting that we have covered over the last couple of weeks, at least two of the women who have come out actually came out sharing their stories for this first time on CNN, describing actually a kind of pattern, a behavior that sounded familiar with other women's stories. This kind of, engagement or conduct where they said that Senator Franken, either during when he was a senator or prior to that, would put his hand, in inappropriate places. One woman that I spoke to last week, an Army veteran, said that he had groped her, touching her breast back when she was deployed in Kuwait in the 2000s. So these stories have been piling up, and the silence actually has been remarkable. We had not heard from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, for example, and unclear if we are going to get a statement from him. But the fact that these statements, Kate, all came in at around the same time goes to show that there was clearly some kind of strategy, clearly some kind of a conversation that took place, and a decision that was collectively made that this announcement and this call on Senator Franken to resign had to happen today.
Yeah, because it's not just Kirsten Gillibrand. As you mentioned, it's now 4 female senators coming out together in coordination to call on Al Franken to resign in this moment. MJ, thank you so much for bringing us breaking news. Ned, Matt, Simone, let's continue the conversation if we can later in the break. Appreciate it. We got to keep moving. Keeping a close eye on the White House right now, where President Trump is about to hold a cabinet meeting ahead of his very big announcement on Israel and where the U.S. Embassy should be. This historic moment coming, an announcement from the president in a short time from now. Let's see what the president says when he meets with his cabinet. We're going to bring you all the news coming out when it happens. We're going to get back to some of our breaking news out of Southern California. Several fast-moving wildfires, including one in the heart of Los Angeles along the busy 405 freeway near the very famous Getty Center. President Trump reacting moments ago, tweeting out this. I'll read it to you. You can see it there as well. Our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in the path of California's wildfires. I encourage everyone to heed the advice and orders of local and state officials. Thank you to all the first responders for your incredible work. That coming in a tweet. Let's go to California, though. Let's get back to CNN's Paul Verkaman, who's been watching all of this. He's near the biggest of the wildfires in Ventura, California. What are you hearing from officials now, Paul?
Well, what they're telling us is 65,000 acres have burned here, and here's where it's burning furiously along this front. This is almost to the Pacific Ocean. You can once in a while see a truck go by. This is that major artery between Ventura and Santa Barbara called the 101. And there are some fire crews in there that are trying to reckon with this. And I'm going to try to give you a sense for the scope of how widespread this is. Okay, you see that pocket of flame over there. Spot fires everywhere. And then I'm going to go ahead and have Tom Larson, my cameraman, just pan into these hills. There are flames everywhere, and it's not like a firefighting crew can get up in there right now. And in a sense, we don't want to use this word waste too strongly, but they wouldn't put resources up in there to try to get that out. It's dangerous for one. It's very difficult terrain. But they've got to let it come and burn down to the freeway and then blast it. And as we drove in this morning, we could see these active flanks of flame. They were stretching along the Pacific Ocean, if you will. I'd say 3, 4, maybe even 5 miles. So that's where the leading and active edge of this fire is right now. The good news is, I'm sure you can tell, there are no houses here. On my side of this freeway, there are some very, very, affluent areas with million-dollar homes. But right now, those houses are not being threatened, Kate, because they're making a stand right here. Back to you.
Now, Paul, thank you so much. Paul. I can see the fire burning right behind you. Thank you so much, Paul. Happening right now at the White House, though. Let's head back to Washington. President Trump is meeting with his cabinet as we speak. We're expecting some of the video that he spoke to cameras that's going to be coming out, and we're going to play that for you any minute now. But when we bring that straight to you, what the president's going to be hitting on, we know that the president in just a couple hours is going to be making a major statement, a major announcement on U.S. policy towards Israel, announcing that the U.S. will be moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel, and the impact that will have. The repercussions very serious. We're going to be bringing that tape to you when it comes in. But as we wait for that, I want to bring in right now Real Clear Politics reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns and CNN senior political analyst Mark Preston. So we're going to get to that as soon as the president speaks. Not sure exactly what topics he's hitting on, guys, but let me ask you about this, because we also have some more breaking news coming in from Capitol Hill. It is now, I think, unless I haven't looked at my email in 2 seconds, it's 6 Democratic senators have now come out collectively to announce that they are calling on Al Franken to resign amidst the allegations that he has been facing. The allegations and the apology that he offered, the allegations he's facing of sexual, of inappropriate behavior, sexual assault, and beyond, including the third highest ranking Democrat in the Senate, Patty Murray, joining this list. Mark, what's going on here?
Well, as Kirsten Gillibrand said in her statement on Facebook when this first came out, we are at a time of reckoning right now. And I think it's very important, though, for you to point out, as you did, that Patty Murray, the number 3 Democrat in the United States Senate, has asked for Al Franken to step down. What does that mean? It means a couple things. It means that clearly the Democratic leadership knew that this was going to happen. So it's not like they're going to be caught in the dark. Of the 6 people we've seen so far, Kate, they are all women. When will we start seeing Democratic male senators coming out and asking for Al Franken to step aside? I think right now Al Franken, the Minnesota senator, is on borrowed time. I would say by the end of the day, I can't imagine he would still be in office. He may do what John Conyers did yesterday, and he may just resign.
And Caitlin, what do you think? Al Franken has been defiant. He has said that he has apologized. He has denied some of the allegations against him. He has apologized for some of them, especially if there's photographic evidence. But he has taken a different tactic than we have seen from others. He's been defiant that he has work to do, and he's going to stay in the Senate to do it now.
Exactly. And until now, he had been supported by his Democratic colleagues in the Senate, which is counter to what we saw with John Conyers. I think the dam has officially broken on Senator Franken. This was clearly a coordinated effort by the women of the Senate to make a statement today. I think it's also important that Gillibrand and others are set to unveil legislation today dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace. That's a bipartisan effort with also male lawmakers on that as well. But what happens by the end of the day, it's hard to see how this is able to be sustained. You also have the backdrop of the question about Congress lagging behind other institutions as it pertains to getting fired for sexual assault allegations. And of course, that Time magazine cover today, again, highlighting the idea that this is a potential watershed moment in our country when it comes to sexual harassment.
And also, Mark, this then enters a very an interesting moment in this very important chapter, which is you've had, when it comes to the realm of politics, Democrats saying, but what about the Republicans? Republicans saying, but what about the Democrats? Democrats have had, it needed to answer some questions on this. This enters a whole new realm now.
I think it does, too, and I think if we put it in the context of Roy Moore as well, a lot of the argument about Roy Moore, at least his defenders were, is they would say, look at Al Franken. You're not calling for Al Franken to resign.
Just heard that in the segment prior to this. Exactly.
Right, and of course, and we have 6 now and quite possibly more. By noon, we'll probably see more come out as well. I do think it takes away that talking point for Republicans, though. But I also do think that if Roy Moore does win next week, Kate, how are these Democratic senators, these women senators who called for Al Franken to step down, and let's assume he does leave, how are they going to walk into the same Senate chamber as Roy Moore, somebody who they think, as many people do, engaged in very inappropriate behavior with young women?
And this also, I think this also is an important, because at the White House, Caitlin, the White House press secretary is asked about the president's endorsement of Roy Moore. Remember, the president endorsing the White House, though, and they said it again yesterday. Sarah Sanders says that they find the allegations very troubling. but also at the same time saying, let the Alabama voters decide. How can they call these things don't seem to fit in line. Calling the president saying, vote for Roy Moore.
Exactly.
And the White House also saying these allegations are still very troubling.
Exactly. I mean, this endorsement, I think why it was significant beyond the Alabama Senate race was that it seemed to be interpreted by many as an endorsement or an overlooking of sorts of this behavior, or saying that this doesn't matter because all that matters is a party line vote. I'm really interested to see.
But she wouldn't even go there. She kept trying to have it both ways, right? Say, Alabama voters should decide. I feel like this is the new way of just hiding behind and dodging a question these days.
Exactly, which raises the question about Republican lawmakers now. If Roy Moore is elected, when he gets to the Senate, if he is elected, how do these Republican lawmakers handle this? Yes, they said that he'll go through the Ethics Committee, but is Donald Trump, as president, having endorsed Roy Moore, going to put pressure on them to overlook some of this, to not engage as strong against
cut you off for only one person. The President of the United States, speaking to cameras now, in front of as his cabinet meeting kicks off. Let's listen.
Respected once again all over the world. However, we face many serious threats. Lots of things are happening in our country. Lots of very positive things, but we have some things that we have to talk about. We're going to be discussing today the situation in North Korea. It will be handled, and it will be handled properly. Many of our brave troops will be spending Christmas overseas. We're thinking about them. We're funding them like they haven't been funded in a long time. Best equipment you can get. Our military is getting stronger. And I expect that very soon I'll be able to say stronger than ever before. It was very depleted when I got here. It's not going to be depleted any longer. So I just want to thank everybody. I want to congratulate Kirstjen Nielsen, who was just confirmed yesterday. It's been a long wait. We're waiting for a lot of others. All of you are waiting for people, or most of you are waiting for people to come in and help. I know from the standpoint of trade, we're waiting for a lot of our trade representatives to be approved. They just don't want to do it. The Democrats just don't want to give us those people. They delay them as long as possible. They take every single minute they can take. It's not right, but I would like to congratulate our new Secretary of Homeland Security. Kirstjen, good luck. I'm especially thrilled to report that the Senate passed massive tax cuts and reform. You know about that very well. You've covered it for the most part accurately, which is surprising for you folks, but that's okay. We're on the verge of a historic victory that cuts taxes for the middle class, for businesses, brings back probably in excess of $4 trillion. As you know, we've been saying $2.5 trillion for years. Well, that number's greatly expanded, and we'll be bringing back in excess of $4 trillion. It'll be put to work in our country. There'll be a lot of jobs being brought back with that money. Right now, that money is being spent overseas. It's not going to be spent overseas anymore. The House and Senate are now negotiating the final bill, and I cannot wait to sign these giant tax cuts and reforms. I mentioned tax cuts, but it's also reforms. But I'm looking forward to signing it. It'll be the largest tax cuts by far in the history of our country. We'll be bringing the business tax from 35 all the way down to 20. At 35, it's the highest in the industrialized world. At 20, we're on the very low side. So we'll be very competitive. You look at China, it's 15%. Other countries are 18%. Some are 23, 24%. The average is actually of the primary competitors is actually 23%. So we'll be pretty much below the average, and we'll be able to compete. And despite all of that, and despite, before we even get this massive injection, we have a stock market that has hit record highs 81 times since our election victory, 81 times. It's at a new high right now. Unemployment is at a 17-year low. Very shortly, it's going to be at a 19-year low. We think the numbers are going to continue to go down, and we're also getting into the pool of the 100 million people that are not working. That pool is now coming back. As you know, that's not considered in the low employment numbers, which means we have a lot of people that want to get to work and that will be working. Consumer confidence is at a 17-year high. We've created nearly 2 million jobs. Think of that, 2 million jobs since Election Day. That's based on consumer confidence. That's based on enthusiasm. Every enthusiasm poll, especially for business enthusiasm and job enthusiasm, is at an all-time high. That's why companies are coming back into our country. They're opening up new plants. Most of you have written about Toyota came back in. We have many car companies coming back in. They're going to Michigan. They're going to Ohio. They're going to the states where they want to be. They can go anywhere they want. South Carolina, North Carolina, but they're going all over our country. They're coming back in. We had many years where we had no new plants. We only had closures. Now we have openings, and that means a lot of jobs. But to get it going the way I really want, where we have GDP getting up to 4, 5, and even 6%, because I think that's possible. If you look back in your notes, you'll say when I said 4%, people said that would be years. Well, it's turned out that I'm right, because without the hurricanes, this last quarter we would have hit 4%. At 3.3%, which was adjusted previously, this is far beyond what anybody thought we would be at. So we're at 3.3% GDP. I see no reason why we don't go to 4, 5, and even 6%. And I don't want to go beyond that, because then I'll be criticized if we don't hit it. But every time we go up 1 point, just so you understand, 1 point means $2.5 trillion, means 10 million jobs. So 1 point in GDP is an incredible statement. $2.5 trillion for each point, 10 million jobs for each point. And I think we're going to be going up a lot of points. So in order to really keep it going the way I want and the way we all want around this table, we have to get past our taxes. I call it the mixer. It's in conference right now, but I call it the mixer. I think when it comes out, it's going to be a beautiful mix. There are things that I like better in the Senate bill. There are things that I like better in the House bill. I think when they come out, we'll have some new additions, and we'll have the best of each. I think we're going to have a fantastic tax bill. There are very, very few people that aren't benefiting by it, but there's that tiny little sliver, and we're going to try and take care of even that very small group of people that just through circumstances maybe don't get the full benefit of what we're doing. But the middle class gets a tremendous benefit, and business, which is jobs, gets a tremendous benefit. We'll be giving the cabinet today an update on national security and strategy. We'll also receive briefings on the latest developments in the tax cut negotiations, and Administrator McMahon, who's done a fantastic job at Small Business Administration. Where's Linda? Linda does a really fantastic job, is helping small businesses in record numbers. And they've needed help really because of the hurricanes. The hurricanes were devastating. As I said, GDP, if we didn't have the hurricanes, we would have hit just about 4 this last. But we had, as you probably know, and probably everybody remembers, we had 5 really bad ones. And we have a lot of businesses that have been severely hurt, and Linda McMahon's done an incredible job in helping those businesses out through the small business. So thank you very much, Linda. So we're in a great period in this country because jobs are coming back, unemployment is low, business has never been stronger, but we have a military that we have to build. I want to thank General Mattis for doing such a great job with respect to ISIS. He's knocked the hell out of them. Of course, I've made it possible with what I've let you do, I think.
Yes, sir.
You say?
Absolutely.
But he has done a fantastic job. He and the military have done a fantastic job with ISIS. They're essentially knocked out of Syria, knocked out of Iraq. That's the good news. The bad news, they go all over the place. And I'll tell you where we don't want them. We don't want them here. We don't want them in our country. Tell them to stay wherever the hell they are. We don't want them coming back into our country. They do go back into some countries. We don't want them going into our country. So we're watching that closely. So I'd like to wish everyone a really great season. I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And I will tell you that we have a big announcement coming up at 1 o'clock. Perhaps a couple of you will be there, maybe not. But it's a big announcement. It's an announcement concerning Israel and the Palestinians in the Middle East. And I think it's long overdue. Many presidents have said they want to do something and they didn't do it. Whether it's through courage or they changed their mind, I can't tell you. But a lot of people have said we have to do something and they didn't do it. So we'll be talking about that something at 1 o'clock. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you all very much.